Leg. Yeah, they're not scratching me a fucking overleech. Oh my god, no, this is broken as hell. Was the first map which I did with this character. I just threw it together very quickly. It's not optimized by any means, but it is super tanky. It doesn't have life gained on block or anything like that, but it looks like the hit pool is like almost infinite. The only weakness is like dots, and the damage is also pretty good for the budget. The only expensive part of that is here is really the Forbidden Flesh and Flame, but it's just more like of a concept to show what you can do with the new Azadi's Crest. Really cool. And yeah, you can basically face tank everything hit based in the entire game. And I just want to show you some footage of me mapping, how it looks like. I just threw this character together and I had a blast because it's so tanky. Like, your block chance is literally almost infinite. I haven't really seen anyone do a build with Azadi's Crest, so right now I just want to experiment with it and showcase what it can actually do. And yeah, it felt really good against tier 17 bosses, but it was kind of struggling against Uber bosses, I have to say. The degen is really bad if you're not leeching or if you don't have overleech active. But for mapping and killing tier 17s, it's super efficient. Yeah, and so in this build I'm using Bladestorm of Uncertainty. You can basically use any skill you want, any attack skill. I'm also using Impale from the Champion Mastery. I have Perma Fortify. And all around the board is just very solid build. You can play it as a Gladiator too, with a bleed based DPS. And it's probably just gonna feel like you're immortal. Overall, I think it's a very strong shield, especially for softcore. I think it's severely underrated. Getting free lucky suppress, getting free lucky block, free X, and then making the enemies hit being unlucky, and on top of that you also get lucky crit chance and lucky crit damage. It's really nice to scale because you're basically multiplying all these effects by an additional time. So it's not a very beginner friendly build, but it's just a very cool concept, I think. I just want to quickly show you my build I made with Azadi's Crest. The shield says lucky or unlucky effects use the best or worst from 3 rolls instead of 2. So I found the shield really cool and I wanted to make a build around it. And here we are with my build. The damage is pretty cracked. I just want to show the concepts and what the defenses look like. I have a Lori's Lantern, which says damage of enemies hitting you is unlucky when you're on low life. That means if the enemy does 1 to 1000, it rolls 3 times and takes the lowest number. Then we have, of course, Lucky Suppress right here. Chance to suppress spell damage is lucky, so we can roll 3 times instead of 2 times. Really cool. And on top of that, we also have Forbidden Flesh and Flame more than skill jewels. Now this build is not a budget build, it is very expensive, but what this allocates basically is the Gladiator's lucky block. So as you can see, more than skill gives you chance to block attack or spell damage is lucky if you've blocked recently. And then we go Versatile Combatant, where we get -10 max block on attack and spell, but we get 2% spell block for each 1% chance to block attack damage. So that means if we just have 100% block, we are at max block with 68 and 67, and this will roll 3 times. So the chance that you get hit by an attack or a spell is essentially 1 in 3 times 3. So it is 1 in 27. So 1 in 27 you will get hit from a spell or an attack. And then if they hit you, the damage will also be unlucky. So now let's go over the offensive. What are the offensives? Well, first of all, you will notice I'm not wearing a helmet, because if I wear a helmet, the game would be too easy. We're making use of that fact, and we're using Dance with Death. It says your critical strike chance is lucky, your damage with critical strike is lucky, and enemies' damage with critical strikes against you is lucky. So now, if lucky and unlucky happen, it will eliminate each other. But in order to get away with the downside of enemies' damage with critical strikes against you is lucky, I use an ephemeral garb of the ephemeral, which says nearby enemies cannot deal critical strikes. Now this means there's no downside of this node, and on top of that, we're also using reckless defense cobalt jewels, which makes hits have 180% critical strike chance against you. There's also no downside of that because we're using ephemeral garb. This is pretty 5-fat, right? This is pretty 5-fat. And they give you the blocks you need to get block kept. And on top of that, why are we going low life? Because of Lori's Lantern. The other reason to go low life is we're using Bloodthirst on one of our links. Bloodthirst makes that if you reserve your life, you get the reserved life, 2% of the life, as added fizz. And we can use Paradoxica to double this added fizz. So instead of 2%, we would get 4% flat damage. And yeah, this just scales really well. So we're low life, everything fits like super well together. And on top of that, a really cool thing is you can have a flask, which says 120% more recovery if used on low life. And since we're always on low life, we're basically getting 120% more recovery from this flask. Very cool. Yeah, so in order to abuse the increase your damage with critical strikes is lucky, we're going volatility support, which makes your minimum damage low and your maximum damage high. So you have a very high range of variance. So 1 to, let's say, 10,000. And then we're using Restarter's Coil, which does essentially the same thing. More maximum and less minimum. And this means our damage is split from 1 to 10k or something. And then we can roll 3 times. And this makes this lucky very efficient. So very efficient. Because our critical strike chance is lucky, we are basically almost capped at like, I think 50 to 60% crit. We are capped, so we don't need that much crit at the end of the day. And then I use Marlene's Fallacy, and this gives us less crit chance, but we don't need that much. And will also give us 300% global crit multi. So not only we're making use of more crit multi, and we're having less crit chance, which doesn't really affect us. So we're also having the upside of Marlene's. Now the damage on this build is very hard to calculate because UB can't calculate triple lucky. But I just threw this character together. It's more of a, how to say, concept than actual really good build. You can also do the same thing with Pain Attunement. Instead you're a spellcaster, so you're low life. And then you can wear Lori's Lantern, you can wear Azadi's Crest, you get the Lucky Suppress, and you can also go Dance with Death as a spellcaster. It would essentially be the same thing. It's just a concept I threw together as a melee character, and you're pretty tanky, so most of the time you're not gonna die unless you're encountering dots. Because we encounter dots, I went for a little bit of Max Leech. I went for Vitality, you can level it up to 21, so you want a lot of recovery, but this is by no means min-maxed, so feel free to play around and make your own version. I recommend 2 max res on armor, I recommend some max res on a tree, and if you find this sort of showcase fun, I'm also doing a hardcore run at the moment with White Sphere of Rending. I'm basically sucking enemies. You can find me live on twitch.tv, aloha. And yeah, that's about it. Try it out. The shield is very fun to play around with.